Hey guys, my name is Eric Smith. Thank you so much for joining me. I know that there's a lot of places that you can go to get help. My guess is you clicked on this because you're feeling frustrated in the job search process. Maybe you're just starting out, or maybe you're in a job that you absolutely hate that just is not serving you. Whatever that is, you clicked on this because you're nervous about the interview process, or you're trying to prepare for the interview process and you don't know what all that entails. The reason you don't is because the entire hiring process is really set up to not serve and help you as the job seeker. I've been in the talent acquisition space for over 10 years. I've seen how job boards have shifted. I've seen how companies' hiring process has changed due to technology. And then I've been on the technology side, actually seeing how applicant tracking systems and AI, artificial intelligence, really does put the odds against you in this entire process. And so I can tell you right now, the reason most people are nervous and likely you're nervous about the interview process or just what your next steps are is because there's so many unknowns out there. It's so competitive. And the hiring process is not necessarily set up to help you win, right? And so I devoted a ton of my time to really helping create resources for job seekers like you because I personally have been in that position where I felt stuck. I felt like there weren't opportunities out there that connected with my skill set, or that if I left my job that I hated and it was draining me, I wasn't going to get the next role in time to make sure that there wasn't a gap in what I was being paid and all these things, right? It's super, super stressful. And so being on the other side of it and having all this experience within the talent acquisition space, working with thousands of companies on their hiring process and consulting them on that, and then actually sitting on the other side in the technology world and realizing how you can game some of this technology restraints and constrictions that do hurt job seekers, I decided I was going to spend a significant amount of my time actually putting resources together that help you overcome all of these things at every single step. And so this video, if you bear with me, there's a little bit of rambling, but I promise it's all getting to a good point. I'm going to talk through really the key 7 things that you should be focused on as a job seeker to ensure that you're putting your best foot forward and giving yourselves the greatest odds of getting the job that you really want. I'm not going to go into full depth because it would take a lot longer, but I'm going to give you the meat and potatoes that you should really be thinking about as a job seeker. And then I'm going to link everything below that will help you, because ultimately this process is so important because it's your future, right? Like if you're in a job that you hate or you're just starting out, it's going to dictate where your career goes, what your salary earnings look like. And so the amount of time that you pour in up front should be great. You should be pouring in as much time as possible, right? Because really it's you're setting yourself up for what the future holds for you. And so if you're not committing the right amount of time, resources into this whole process, you're setting yourself up to fail, right? So I always advocate for every student that I coach and work with. I always say, you need to pour as much time in as possible up front, because where you start will open doors to the rest of your career and your earning potential and all of these things. So if you're feeling nervous, that's okay. You're at the right spot. But the other side is you have to make sure from this point, now that you know these things, you have to make sure that you're committing the right amount of time and resources to overcome nerves, to make sure that you're focused on the right jobs, so that you can open the right doors for yourself and actually set your future up where you want it to go. So I'm going to talk through some of the key things that you should be thinking about, and then I'm going to link everything else below. So go down the rabbit hole with me. I promise you, I'm a very genuine person, and the whole point of what I'm trying to do is to help you because I've been there myself. So number 1, 7 most important things that I would think that you should focus in order to get the job that you want and that you deserve. Number 1, zone in on what you want to do. So if you're just starting out, or maybe you're in a job that you hate that's just not serving you, right? Again, I've been there. I've been at the starting line, not knowing what I want to do, not knowing what I want my career to look like. It's okay. You don't have to know what you want to do. I've also been in a position, working, a job where I just hated it. It was draining me. I would go home at the end of the day and feel like I can't keep doing this. The Sunday scaries were just killing me because I knew I was in the wrong role, but I was scared to make that change because it was so daunting to update my resume and apply and go through the entire hiring process, and just how competitive the market was. It scared me, and it held me in a position that I shouldn't have been for much, much longer. So if you're just starting out or you're in a role that you hate, what I would focus in on, or what I would encourage you to do, is zone in on what you want to do, right? Where you spend your time, and the significant amount of time that you spend in a job is great, right? And so you need to make sure that you're focused in on what you want to be doing, right? And maybe that's making a list of things that you're really interested in. Maybe it's a list of things that you're really passionate about, or maybe it's a list of things that you just really want to try and do, right? Something completely new that is of interest to you, but maybe you're not an expert in it, and that's fine, right? But zone in on the things that you care about, right? So this is the time to be selfish. If you are just starting or you're looking to make a change, be selfish. What do you want? What do you care about? Zone in on that, and then from there, take it a step further. What industries do some of those interests, passions, or new focuses sit within, right? What are the industries that support some of those things, right? Maybe it's you're interested in, I don't know what it is specifically, but focus in on what industries are within that range of interests or passions. And then from there, take stock of what your natural skills are or your current experience skill set, and try and start aligning that to roles within some of these companies within those industries, right? So it's really just a process of narrowing down, but you're being selfish about it because you're looking at, what do I care about? What are my passions? What industries do some of those passions and interests sit within? What companies are within some of those industries? What are the top companies in those industries? And then from a layer deeper is just, what are the roles that they hire for? What are the roles within some of those industries and some of those companies that my natural skill set and my current experience sits with? Maybe that's entry level, maybe it's mid-level, maybe you're transitioning to a role where you're doing some crossover experience, whatever that is. But you want to be really deliberate and focused in on what you want. That way, when you're putting your resume together, which is what I'm going to talk about next, you can be really, really focused and tailor all of your applies and your resumes to the same type of job within the same type of industry, which increases your odds of getting the interviews and actually getting the jobs that you want. So it starts with just being really specific. You want to be specific about what it is that you want, and focus that around what you're interested in, what you care about, where your passions are. It's so much easier to go to work when you actually care about what you do. And you don't have to have your whole career mapped out. That's fine. But start with what you want to do and start with where your natural experience and skill sets sit. From there, number 2, you really want to tailor your resume. So this is probably where people get hurt the most within the application process. Maybe you're somebody who's been applying but just getting terrible results. Oftentimes it's because your resume is not focused, right? So you want to make sure that you're tailoring your resume to what you're applying to. This is probably the most important one of all 7 that you really want to be focused in on. Is if you don't have a good resume that's serving you in the best way possible and tailored to the job that you're applying to, chances are your odds of getting that first interview, which really sets up the entire hiring process to you getting the job you want, your results are going to be really, really bad. So what I mean by tailoring your resume is, once you've zeroed in on the industry, the types of companies, and the type of job specifically that you're applying to. Now, when I say that, the example I'll give you is, let's say sales. You want to go in sales, or maybe it's marketing. You know that marketing is an area that you're really passionate about. You want to learn more about digital marketing, whatever that is. And that's where you want to focus your apply path. What you're going to do is you're going to figure out, am I entry level because I don't have any experience in this, or maybe I'm carrying over some experience, so I'm more mid-level. But you've done your homework to figure out where your skill set aligns so that you are applying to the right type of job within that field. So let's say for this example, I'm entry level in sales or I'm entry level in marketing, whichever example you want to use. Then from there, you've looked at all the different entry level jobs within sales or within marketing, right? Typically, most companies, if you look broadly their entry-level marketing role or entry-level sales role is going to look pretty much the same as every single company out there. They're looking for a very similar type of qualification, a very similar key roles and responsibilities, because most of these jobs, everyone's competing for the same type of talent. So their job descriptions tend to look pretty similar. So if you were to look at 100 different job applications from 100 different companies for an entry-level salesperson, typically that job description is not going to vary too far. And so me, as somebody who wants to go for that first role, I can tailor my resume by looking at 5 or 10 different entry-level sales roles that are all pretty similar. And I can tailor my resume to fit what they're looking for. I can use a lot of the same keywords. And what I mean by keywords are what words are they using often throughout the entire job description, right? What are some of the things that keep reoccurring in key responsibilities or key qualifications? Maybe it's cold calling, maybe it's outreach, maybe it's inside sales. Whatever these keywords are, you want to make sure that you're mirroring those keywords within your own resume, because what applicant tracking systems are doing are ranking and scoring candidates based on keyword match. It's artificial intelligence. It's really how companies are screening at that first level. They're making sure that you're a match on paper for the job that you're applying to. And so how you can game this system and ensure that you're getting more phone interviews or first interviews is to make sure that you're tailoring your resume, mirroring as many keywords as possible throughout your resume to the type of job that you're applying to. I'm not telling you to lie in your resume. You should never do that. But make sure that where there is crossover and where you can mirror some of those keywords, that you're doing that. The whole point is you want to be qualified on paper through their lens. How they are deeming you qualified through their lens is based on their job description. So look at the job descriptions that are similar for what you're applying to. Typically, if you're focused in on a type of job within an industry, that job description should look pretty similar across multiple companies. And so that's how you want to be tailoring your resume, is based on the job descriptions that you're applying to. So focus your resumes, tailor your resume, because that will increase your odds of actually getting that first interview. And it's all about getting that first interview and then from there practicing all those things, right? So you really want to make sure that you're focusing where you're applying so that you can tailor your resume. Number 2 is tailor your resume to what you're actually applying to. Number 3, you want to cast a really wide net, right? So you have to make sure that you're applying super broadly. I can't tell you how many times I talk to people and they're like, well, I'm just not getting the results I want. I've been applying, but not really hearing back. And I ask them, how many times have you applied to, how many jobs have you applied to? And they'll tell me 10 or 15 jobs. 10 or 15 jobs. There are millions and millions of jobs out there. There are millions and millions of companies out there that are hiring for people like you and looking for people like you. And so if you're limiting your scope to just 10 or 15 applies, your odds of success in the hiring process and getting the job that you want are going to go way, way down. And the reason for this is there's so much bias that exists within the hiring process. It sucks. It's unfair, but it's the reality. And so you might be the best qualified candidate and you might be screened out before you ever even talk to a human being, just because technology read your resume wrong, or maybe you didn't tailor your resume the correct way and pulls you right out, right? Or maybe you are the most qualified candidate, but you applied one day late and they just found their top 10 people that they want to interview and they closed that job. What I'm trying to tell you is your success in getting what you want, your success in getting a high number of interviews and getting in the hiring process for these companies will directly correlate with how many times you're hitting the apply button, right? So you need to be applying super broadly. When I tell people, look at the passion, interest area, passion area, look at the different companies that are hiring within that industry and make a top 20 list of the top most aspirational companies that you would just absolutely love to work for. Make sure that you're spending time and tailoring your resume for those top 10, 20, but then apply really broadly. You don't know what's out there. There's so many companies and so many companies that are starting right now. And if you're just applying to your top dream aspirational companies, you're going to fail. It's just, unfortunately, that's the reality. You're going to fail. You need to make sure that you are casting a very wide net and applying very broadly. There are so many companies that are out there that you are not aware of that might be a tremendous fit for you and may open doors for you to eventually get to one of those really aspirational companies. But if you're just setting that bar there and you're saying, this is the only thing I want and I'm not doing anything else, you should expect to fail. And it's because truly getting the job that you want and clicking the apply button and getting interviews, it's a numbers game. So you need to cast a really wide net. So number 3 is you have to cast a wide net, and you have to make sure that you're holding yourself accountable to applying very broadly. What I recommend people to do is when you're looking for a job, that is your full-time job. If you're not happy where you are and you want to change that, the only way you're going to actually make that change is if you get out there and get in front of other companies that are looking for people like you. And so you need to hold yourself accountable to a really, really lofty application goal. Maybe that's 25 applications a day. Maybe it's 50 applications a day. Hold yourself accountable, cast a really broad net. That will increase your odds of getting the job that you want and that you deserve, right? So number 3, cast a super wide net. Number 4, practice. You have to practice, but you have to practice correctly. I say this and I know people are like, okay, great advice, practice. Sure, that makes sense. I can't tell you how many people get in their own way, trip at the starting line because they didn't practice for something that they know is so, so important. The reason people don't pour time into practice how they should is because practicing is uncomfortable. Practicing for an interview is probably the most uncomfortable thing that you can do because interviewing is one of the most uncomfortable things that you can do. And so people don't like thinking about things that they don't like or that make them uncomfortable. And they definitely don't like pouring time into something that makes them feel uncomfortable. And if you're somebody who's watching this and you're still hanging in there with me, stay with me, is because you get terrible interview anxiety, you get terrible nerves when it comes to interviewing. You can coach yourself into comfort. And I swear to you, I've coached so many people. You can coach yourself into comfort in the interview process so that you're actually looking forward to going into an interview because you practice so much that you're sick of hearing your own voice. Right? So it's all about practice. You have to make sure that you are practicing, but practicing the right way, right? You can overcome nerves in the interview process. You can ensure that when you have an interview that's so important, it's the job that you really want, that you are increasing your odds of putting your best foot forward and hitting that interview out of the park by so much. It's just a matter of how much you're willing to pour into the practice side and how uncomfortable you're willing to get with practicing. So I cover practice a lot more. There's a lot more you can do, but I always say you have to practice. You have to pour in so much time, and you have to be really specific about how you're practicing. Practice with different people. Practice talking and answering the questions that you're anticipating. There's a whole list of interview questions on my website and in other videos that I have, and in the links below, I've got an entire course that focuses on this. I've got PDFs that give you the top interview questions that you can anticipate. But you need to be practicing your answers to all of these questions, and you need to do it in front of a mirror so you can see how you're answering these questions. You can see, are you smiling when you answer? Are you using your hands? All these different things that the interviewer is going to see, you can see in advance. You can tailor if you know that you're not answering these questions correctly, or maybe you're not giving off the right energy, smiling, showing, personality, or maybe you're rambling like I am right now. You get to see all these things if you're practicing correctly. So I can't emphasize this enough. You have to pour in so much time. Getting the job that you want can change your whole life. It can change how much money you're making. It can change your salary trajectory, your salary path, all of these things, right? And so for you not to spend the right amount of time practicing for an interview that could change your life, there's really no excuse for it other than people just get nervous. They don't want to do something that makes them nervous or uncomfortable, and you have to get out of your own way and do it, but do it correctly. So number 4 is practice, but practice correctly. Check out the links below for more specifics on how to practice correctly. And then number 5, Chameleon Story. So this is something that's new. A lot of people don't really know what a chameleon story is, but in the interview process, you're likely going to get asked behavioral-based questions. These are, tell me about a time when, right? They're trying to look back at your experience, but also see how you relate those experiences to the questions that they're asking. This is what most people get most nervous about in the interview process is what questions are going to come my way, and am I going to trip up or am I going to blank on this interview and not know what to say? In order to overcome that, and in order to make sure that you know you have the answer ready for them, that you're not going to completely forget and blank space out, you want to create a chameleon story. And what a chameleon story is, and I go into greater detail in some of the resources below, but I'm just going to give you a high level of what the chameleon story looks like today. The chameleon story is a real story. If you're making up a story for these behavioral-based interview questions, you're going to find yourself tripping. You're going to get yourself into trouble, and you can bet you're not going to get the job that you want because you're lying in the interview, and that is the quickest way to not get what you want, right? So don't lie. These should be real stories. But what you want to do is you want to prepare them ahead of time. I always say create 4 to 6 chameleon stories. And what a chameleon story is, it's a story that has multiple elements in it that you can use based on questions that are asked to you, right? So maybe you get asked 5 different questions that you can answer the same using the same story because there's an element of each one of those 5 questions within that same story. An example of this would be, let's say the chameleon story that you're going to use is a school project, right? There was a really big school project, and there's multiple elements within that story, right? Within that group project, you worked with a difficult person. So if someone says, tell me about a time you worked with a difficult person, how did you overcome that? You can use that chameleon story. Maybe within that same group project, you had to learn a new skill. It was something that you weren't used to. You had to learn a new technology and do the group project around this new technology that was completely new to you that you had to overcome. That answers maybe in a second. Tell me about a time you had to learn a new technology and how did you go about doing that? How did that turn out? You can use that chameleon story because there was you learned something new within that group project, right? So still same chameleon story. Maybe within that chameleon story or that group project, something broke down, something went wrong. Maybe there was a power outage and you lost all your material 2 nights before, right? And then you can connect that to another behavioral-based question where, tell me about a time that you had to overcome something on a very short deadline. You can use that same chameleon story, same story that you would use for a difficult person, same story that you would use for, tell me about a time that you had to learn a new technology. Tell me about a time that you had to overcome an obstacle on a very short deadline. It's the same story, right? But you're just tailoring how you're telling that story based on the question that's asked. And in order to make sure that you're not telling the same story for all of the behavioral-based questions, you want to come up with about 6 real stories that have multiple elements within them and prepare them ahead of time. Practice them ahead of time. Write out all the different elements within that story and then practice pulling out which story fits best with the question that's asked. And it's okay to repeat the same story if they're asking a question that you just can't connect to one of the other 6, right? You can say, actually, to best answer that, it's probably that same story. You probably only want to do that twice, but you want to have chameleon stories ready. This ensures that you're not going to be stumped. You know how to answer these questions in the best way possible, and you can connect them to a real experience and have a really practiced summary of how to answer that behavioral-based question because you've done it already. You've written out these stories. You know how to emphasize the points that they're asking about. That's a chameleon story. It's just a story that can go in a lot of different directions because there's a lot of elements within that story. And my guess is for most people, they have a lot of chameleon stories. They just haven't had time to sit down and think about it. So when you're practicing, you want to really think about these chameleon stories ahead of time, write them out, write out all the different elements that are within each one. And then when you're practicing, have people ask you behavioral-based questions. Again, I have links to behavioral-based questions so you can prepare ahead of time. But have people ask you and then practice on the spot, pulling out which chameleon story makes the most sense for the question that's being asked. That's a chameleon story. That's how you practice for them. Number 6, I promise, guys, we're almost there. Stay with me. Number 6, mirroring your interviewer. This is so important. Energy is so important in the interview process. Not every interviewer is going to be the same. Some people have low energy. Some people have high energy. If you're meeting with a person that's a high energy person and you're a naturally low energy person, you want to try and mirror and match some of their energy. If you are not mirroring to your interviewer, it could hurt you in the interview process. I told you earlier in this, the hiring process is unfair. There's bias within the interview process. It's unfair, but that's the reality. And so You want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward, increasing your odds of moving forward in the interview process, getting the offer at every step. And a big one, unfortunately, is interview mirroring. So you need to mirror your interviewer. If you're somebody who's naturally super high energy and you're meeting with somebody who's got a really much lower energy level than you, you want to really taper your energy level down to match who you're interviewing with. It can be off-putting if you're low energy and they're high energy, or they're low energy and you're high energy, right? And so you need to make sure that you're matching your interviewer's energy and mirroring that throughout the interview. It will help you. I know that's controversial. A lot of people are like, I'm going to be me, and that's fine. That's fine. Be you. But I'm just telling you, these are things that will increase your odds of success. And all of my advice is to give you success in the interview process and increase your odds of success in the interview process at every single step. So interview mirroring, it is absolutely important. That is number 6. Number 7, closing the interview. This one's probably the most important when you're actually in the interview process. So tailoring your resume is the most important early on to ensure that you're getting these interviews, but closing the interview correctly is probably the most important when it comes to actually interviewing. So at the end of an interview, whether that's phone or in person, they're likely going to ask you, what questions do you have for me? Right? This is where you can ask questions of the interviewer or the company, and you should have your questions written out ahead of time. But your very last question should always be, and you can set it up this way to say, I was super confident and really excited about this opportunity. I was confident that my skill set was a fit and this was going to be a great match. But after talking with you, I'm even more confident that I would be a great asset to your team and really hit the ground running. But I want to make sure that you have that same confidence in me. So are there any hesitations that you have right now about me being a qualified fit for your team or being, an asset to your team if you were to bring me on? What you're asking them to do is you're putting them on the spot and asking them to give you objections as to why they wouldn't hire you. It's an awkward question, but most people, because they get put on that spot, will give you honest feedback. If you're the interviewer and someone says, why wouldn't you hire me? Or don't say it like that, right? You always want to lead in with like, I'm super excited. I was super confident before, but after talking with you, I'm even more confident that I would be a great fit, but I want to make sure that you have that same confidence. Are there any hesitations right now that I can speak to about me being a qualified fit for this role? If they say something, it's because they got stuck early in the interview process saying this person's not qualified because they don't have enough experience here, right? And if they say that to you, well, my biggest concern is you're not qualified in this big area that I really need somebody qualified for. This is a great thing, right? You should never, ever be defensive and jump all over and be like, well, no, I am qualified for that. Why would you think? This is the time for you to overcome this objection that otherwise would likely reject you from the interview process. And so you want to answer this in a way where you're taking the blame, right? You say, I'm so glad you brought that up. This is actually my fault. I'm a lot more experienced than what you think I am in this area, but I see why you think I'm not. I didn't add enough color, and so please allow me to explain. And then further explain why that worry of theirs shouldn't be a worry. I'm actually really qualified in this area, and I spent 3 years doing this here, and here, and throughout my time here and with my experience here, I actually have learned a lot in that area and I've grown in that area and I'm really, really strong. I just didn't emphasize it, and that's my fault. So give them the background as to why that shouldn't be. This is your time to overcome their objections, right? And if it's truly something that you're weak in, try and connect dots. This is where you want to try and connect dots to, though I might be weaker in experience in that area, I do think that, through my experience in this, I can pick that skill up really quickly, and that shouldn't be a concern for you. But I understand why that is, but I just want to give you confidence that, I'm somebody who can learn really quickly and overcome that and really be an asset and hit the ground running for you. It's allowing you to overcome their rejection of you as a candidate right there on the spot, right? And typically, most interviewers, they have their mind made up, but it's typically wrong, right? They have a very short window to assess you, your skill set, your background, and they're doing it through questions that, most interviewers aren't great at asking interview questions. And so maybe they just asked a question that didn't, feel out the answer that they really wanted. And so they're going to reject you, even though you're really qualified for it. So by asking this question, and posing it in the way that you are. You're posing it in such a positive way that you're almost coaxing them to say, yeah, I think you would be a really good fit, and I think you're a good candidate. However, you're not qualified in this specific area that I really want. It allows you to say, I'm so glad you brought that up. I actually am, and it's my fault. I should have provided a little bit more color in my background experience. When I was at X, I specifically focused a large amount of my time in this area, and I actually managed and led whatever. You're just giving more weight to that specific experience or skill set they were hesitant about, and then allowing them to feel more comfortable. And you say, so I do feel like that's a strength of mine, but again, it's most important that you do. Does that help, or can I add more color to that part of my experience? Again, you're asking them to give you feedback and say, that still doesn't cover what I'm looking for, or to say, oh, I didn't know that. I'm so glad you brought that up. You just overcame, and then you say, that's amazing. Is there anything else that, I want to make sure that you have a full picture, and that if there are hesitations, I can answer them. If they say, no, that was the biggest one, you say, great, I'm so glad. Again, I'm so excited about this. I think I'd be a great fit. And most importantly, I think I could hit the ground running and really add impact to your team. You want to leave them with a good, lasting impression, right? But the most important thing you can do is overcome their objections of you on the spot. Because if you don't do that, you're really leaving it up to chance that they captured everything that they needed, which most of the time they don't, right? So ask what hesitations they have, try and overcome those, take the blame for not sharing, more about that area of your experience and why, it's your fault that they had those hesitations in the first place. But then circle back and ask, I feel like that shouldn't be a worry of yours, but the most important thing is for you to not have that worry. Did I answer that in the correct way, or can I add more color to it? I promise you guys, this is the most important thing that you can do to close an interview, because it increases your odds of getting the job that you want, which is everything, right? So make sure that you're closing the interview and asking for hesitations and overcoming those hesitations in the interview. That alone, if you hung in there and you're still with me, that piece of advice alone will increase your odds of getting job offers so much, right? So you have to make sure you're doing that. And then bonus number 8, I said only 7. Bonus number 8, you have to keep applying. Even if you had a great interview, if you thought it went amazing, keep applying. Keep casting a super wide net. It doesn't matter. You could be the best qualified candidate. You could crush your interview. And then when it comes to a decision time, maybe the hiring manager knows their best friend's cousin who's interviewing for that role, and they're going to pick them, right? It's not fair. The interview process is not fair. So you have to make sure that you're still casting a super wide net, that you're applying until you get that job offer. And then when you get the job offer, there's a lot of things you should do to negotiate your salary. But guys, there's so much more information. These are the most important 7 if you're just starting out. Most important 8, I should say. So I have a lot more information. This is a long ramble video, but this is short compared to all the resources that I have around this stuff. Check out the links below, guys. I have an entire interview prep course. It's a masterclass on every single step in the process, and it walks you through in detail everything I just mentioned in this short video. But more importantly, guys, it's super consumable, and it's it's priced in a way that's not going to completely break your bank. I've seen courses out there that are like $1,000 for the comprehensive interview. It's crazy, right? If you're truly stressed about this is not a time to be gouging people. So I tried to package as much content into this, and I poured so much time into it because I know how important it is to put your best foot forward and to get the job that you really want and how that can set up your life. But I packaged it into a price where truly it's, if you look at, going out to dinner or what you spend on a weekend, this is nothing, right? And so all of my content I try and make super accessible because I know how important it is, but also it's a drop in the bucket if you get the job that you want, right? What you're investing in financially for a course, but also in time that you're committing is a drop in the bucket for what this can do for your life, your career trajectory, your salary and earning trajectory, all these things that really alter your life. So guys, thanks for hanging in there with me. I know this was a ramble, but I wanted to make sure that I'm giving you content to show you that there are so many elements to the interview process that can impact whether or not you're getting swings at the plate, whether or not you're getting interviews, whether or not you're actually moving forward in the interview process, or if you're getting offers. So You have to make sure that you're diligent, you're focused in all these areas, play all this back, make sure you're, again, I'm going to go through it really quickly. Zone in on what you really want. Be selfish about what it is that you really want to do. Research the companies, find the roles that fit for you. Then once you've found the type of role that you want to be applying to, tailor your resume, customize your resume to the job descriptions of a lot of companies for that same type of role. It's going to increase your odds of getting the interviews. And then from there, apply broadly, cast a super wide net. Practice, you have to practice, but practice correctly. If you're not pouring time into practicing correctly with the right type of prep questions, you're setting yourself up for failure. But you can practice and coach yourself into comfort around interview nerves. If you're somebody who gets really nervous, you can coach yourself into comfort. I promise you that. So practice correctly, practice behavioral-based questions, the chameleon stories. I promise you, it will decrease your chances of blanking in the interview and bring down nerves, right? If you know how to answer behavior-based questions before they're even asked because you have your stories ready, how much you can bring your nerves down is crazy, right? So have chameleon stories, write them out ahead of time, practice them ahead of time, and then practice mirroring your interview. Practice with a lot of different people, but mirror their energy. Mirroring within the interview process is important. Unfortunately, there's bias. Not every interviewer is the same, so mirror your interviewer, and then make sure you're closing the interview. This is so vital. They're going to give you time to ask questions. Your last question should always be, set it up the right way. I'm so excited about this. I was super excited before, but after talking to you, I'm even more excited. But I want to make sure you're excited too. Are there any hesitations that you have about my background and fit for this role? Let them answer. If they give you one, take the blame. I'm so sorry. That's actually my fault. I should have added more color to that part of the experience because I'm actually really strong in that area, and I don't want that to be a concern for you. And then once you've overcome that, then circle back and say, so I don't think that's something that you should be concerned about, but the most important thing is that you don't. Did I answer that in a way where you feel like that's not a concern, or can I add more color to it, right? You're asking them to give you objections to why they wouldn't hire you, right? And if you can overcome those, it increases your odds of getting offers. It's so vital. And then keep applying broadly, guys. There's so many companies out there, more than what you think there are. So thanks for hanging in there with me, guys. Check out everything below, all of my content. There's so much more information in these 7, but so much broader, right? So check out all the content below. Everything is centered on helping you get what you want. I appreciate you hanging in there with me, guys. Thanks.